check out Taylor's life story first. He's 26 and unmarried. Used to like to fish in the waters of the Green Bay. Loved fishing. It was an obsession. Loved eating fish too. Just catching them. It's just very fish-centric. Surprised it wasn't bad at all. The folks were nice to him, and nobody told him he was not going to heaven. An older couple, he invited them to come over for dinner. The old man, Troy, told them over dinner that he was writing a book about what the world would be like after the rapture. He explained that the rapture was when Jesus came back in the clouds and called all his faithful children home. Taylor and Angie were dumbfounded. They never heard anything so strange before. Troy explained all of it in detail. See, part of the situation here is that the particular brand of Christianity that this comes from believes itself to be the only safeguard and source of truth, which, I mean, you could probably truly say about a lot of religious sects within Christianity and without. But the idea that this kid went to church all his life growing up and then just had never heard of the rapture means he's part of one of those other Christian sects that didn't teach about the rapture, which isn't surprising because the rapture is an idea that only took root in, particularly this interpretation of the rapture, is an idea that only took root in a particular offshoot of Protestantism, highly influential, but in the 19th century. It's less than 200 years old. I talked about that a little bit last week with the English brethren. So it's just, Taylor decided it was time for him to become a different type of fisherman, of course. Whistler used to be a good doctor, but he fell into some tough times and messed up some procedures. This was established in court several times by attorneys who won malpractice suits against him. Finally, his medical license was suspended and no insurance company would give him coverage. He was still a doctor, he just couldn't practice for 2 years, and then he lost a lawsuit. He'd be poor for the rest of his life. Whistler wasn't a happy camper. Whistler was bitter. Once his license was reinstated, he had to work like a dog. He practiced safe medicine, running every imaginable lab test to be sure that a person who came to him with the flu didn't actually have bongo fever or something. The health insurance companies then accused him of running too many expensive tests. Crooked lawyers. They were the worst, he thought. If any of the patients didn't recover completely and quickly, lawyers tried to make Whistler look like Dr. Frankenstein. Whistler was sick of it all, but he needed money. That's when a man called Chase offered to pay Whistler to see a few people who had been hurt in car crashes. Whistler asked how many people were hurt, thinking he would be seeing 4 or 5 people at the most. Chase said there were between 30 and 45 people with neck, shoulder, and back injuries. Whistler told him that he could not possibly accept so many new patients because he didn't have malpractice insurance. Chase said, "Don't worry, Doc. These people ain't ever going to sue you. I'll make sure of that." Chase and Whistler were in business. The accident victims loved Whistler. They had never seen a happier doctor. He smiled and whistled happy tunes while he put casts on arms that weren't broken and braces on perfectly healthy necks. And with regular access to local hospitals, Whistler made the global community happy too. Here was a man they could use. Whistler could give them access to the medical records of hundreds of thousands of people. Those records held many secrets that patients hoped would never be made public. Every time private records were compromised, GC visited the victims. They assured the patients that no one had to find out what was in their files, ever. To be certain, all they had to do was an occasional favor for the GC. Well, that implies that all of the bad guys have been blackmailed into it. That raises even more ethical questions about converting them. Certainly more ethical questions about shooting them. Stanley was a news director. Oh, good, he makes fake news. One of his first challenges was marketing a soup that supposedly had big chunks of meat and vegetables. But when the photographers took shots of the steaming hot soup, all you could see was soup. That's a ontological question about what soup is. So Stanley filled the bottom of the bowl with marbles. Yeah, that's how you take pictures of soup. Then he added the soup. Viola, potatoes, carrots, and hunks of meat were sticking out of the top. It's a brilliant campaign. Would have been, they hadn't been charged with fraudulent advertising by doing the industry standard for advertising soup. Years later, a TV news scene, there weren't enough protesters for a good story. Oh no, fake protesters. Changed his coat 3 times to make the crowd look bigger. One person pretending to be 2 other people is exactly how you increase the size of a crowd of protesters without being noticed. Holy crap. Oh, man. The people Stanley admired the most were the directors and technicians who staged the first moon landing. Oh, wow. I was not expecting, for all of this game's faults, I was not expecting it to embrace moon conspiracies. When thugs were detained or arrested in Rainsville, Sergeant Terry did the interrogations. He didn't allow them to be recorded in any way, and he always worked alone. He dealt with those accused of crimes one at a time. He was looking for people in his custody who had special talents. He called them the Select. Sergeant Terry quietly and calmly told the Select that they could prove that they were involved in other more serious crimes. They had 2 choices. They could either be convicted of whatever Sergeant Terry accused them of, or they could go for what he called Option B. Option B wasn't hard to understand. They'd have to give Sergeant Terry the name of someone else to arrest, testify against him or her in court, and agree to the terms of parole that Sergeant Terry would disclose later, if the person they named was convicted. When the other lawbreakers were off the streets and Sergeant Terry received the credit, the informants were told about the terms of release. To be specific, they had to choose to join a secret militia that was being formed in a foreign country. They would be given training in urban warfare and house-to-house combat, especially on how to disarm citizens. And few who declined the opportunity were put in solitary confinement at an undisclosed location. He remained there until they pleaded for another chance to accept Sergeant Terry's offer. Sergeant Terry was a recruiter for the global community. Oh, man. Sergeant Terry's a bad cop. When Jude was a kid, he played teacher, while his neighbors played cops and robbers. He planned the steps to become Teacher of the Year someday. When Jude complained to the principal, he was criticized for losing control of the class. Oh, no. Bad teachers, bad... New teachers, good teachers. People who just want to be teachers. But mom and dads are bad and principals don't support them and the kids are hellacious. All right, Teddy Mac. Active at a Methodist church. Read prayer groups and Bible studies. He spoke Christianese. He was a phony and he knew it. He wasn't ashamed of it either. It wasn't that he doubted God existed. He just didn't care. Same as studying multiple fractions. He was never going to use it in his real life. He seemed to have devoted a lot to it. Married a pastor's daughter. They planned to lead the high school and junior high youth groups. Unknown to Ronnie and everyone else at the church, Teddy had been carrying on with a girl that worked with him in a local restaurant. Oh, of course, Ronnie went to heaven. Oh, he did go back to a Methodist church, though. Well, that's interesting. First clue that Methodists might go to heaven. Akar Benz. Belgian tennis pro. Now musician for the devil. I think I know a Chase Smith. Chase was a lawyer. He was 25 and he was a lawyer? He was a bad lawyer. He's at 25. How did he get through law school? Chase was a genius. How could he be a bad lawyer? Some people have troubles or problems. Shaq was just plain nuts. People as crazy as Jack don't merely have one symptom. They have what one doctor called points on a graph. When you connect all the dots or behavioral issues, there's no other conclusion. Jack was cruel to animals as a child. He never learned right from wrong. He just could not grasp the fact that some acts were wrong. He never ever cried. He only laughed at awkward moments. This man needs grace. Somehow he became an accountant. Son of a tribal leader, age ? Marital status ? But he is male. Brother Mumbo, the son of a tribal leader, he was too humble to allow himself to be called Prince Mumbo. He traveled secretively, telling about the perspective of his people when they became believers. Brother Mumbo's life was in danger. So many evil people wanted to stop him from spreading the truth, that he traveled with armed guards. Brother Mumbo agreed to speak to audiences only if his people were certain that he would be safe. Would be safe. Come on, guys. He is too benevolent to charge a fee. All he ever requests is first-class airfare for himself and his 5 companions, good hotel accommodations, travel expenses, and a love offering. 50% of the amount of ticket and DVD sales, and a small donation to his not-for-profit organization, paid in advance. Scarecrow was the owner of some gun shops. He was a perfectly legitimate businessman. However, agent who raised his largest store disagreed. They accused him of making so many straw sales, they called him the Scarecrow.